Well, hi there. Awesome, you guys. I think we're going to get right to it today. I'm going to continue to watch our Zoom and see if anyone else is kind of trickling in late. If this is the very first time that you guys are coming to one of our Zooms, we appreciate you being here. It's Orca Month, so this is actually the third kind of session or lesson that is filling in with our Southern resident topic. If you happen to miss the first two, you can go back and watch them on YouTube. We can get those put up in the chat while Lucy is going to present our third installment here. But before we get up and going, I wanted to give staff and Lucy and a few of our adult guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Cindy, I'm going to let you go first.
All right, thanks, Amanda. My name is Cindy Hansen, and I'm the Education and Advocacy Coordinator for Orca Network. So I work really closely with Amanda. We've been working really hard on Orca Month this month. So great to be here, and thanks everybody for joining us.
And Wendy.
I'm Wendy Sines. I manage the Langley Well Center here on Whidbey Island, and we have reopened about 3 days a week. So stop by and see us.
And I want to give you the opportunity just to say hi to everybody and tell them what you do with us at the Langley Well Center.
Well, I'm one of the volunteers at the Whale Center. Every week I volunteer, so I get to talk to kids all the time who come in. Maybe even some of you who are tuned in today. That's my favorite thing to do.
Well, thanks, Dan, and thanks for continuing to come to our youth events here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lucy. So if you want to introduce yourself one more time and get started with the lesson, it's all you.
Awesome. All right. So I'm Lucy. And for those of you who this is your first time, I'm from Friday Harbor High School. I'm a junior, and this has sort of worked in that I get to sort of do this as a community project through my school, which has been really fun. So I will share my screen and we can get started with the presentation for today. I just want to make sure, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about Southern resident families and the bonds that they create with their families over their lifetimes, which is a really cool and sweet thing to learn about. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. So the Southern residents live in pods, which is basically extended family groups. And the pods are made up of a whale's grandparents, moms, dads, uncles, cousins, sisters, brothers. Their whole extended family group is in that pod. And the Southern resident population is made up of 3 different pods. J-pod has 24 whales currently, K-pod has 17 whales, and L-pod is the largest of the 3 with 34 whales. And each pod is made up of different family groups, each of which is designated by the oldest female in the group. So the mom or the grandma or the great grandma of the group. And Southern resident orca mothers, grandmothers, and their whole family stay together for life, which is pretty unique. Oftentimes when animals get old enough to have their own kids, they split from their own family to form their own, kind of like humans do. And because the Southern residents stay with their family for their whole life, they develop strong emotional bonds with each other, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation. So like I said earlier, each pod is made up of smaller family groups. And for example, on the right here, this is the L47 family. So L47 is the mom and the matriarch of the group. Her letter and number designation tells us 2 things. That letter lets us know what pod she belongs to. So in this case, she's a part of L pod. And then the 47 was given to her because she's the 47th orca that scientists recorded in her pod. So if you see in this whole family group, every whale has a little L in front of their name because they're all part of the same family in L pod. And so L47 also has a common name, kind of like you would give a pet. And so her name is Marina. And so the Southern residents are a matriarchal society, meaning that the moms lead the group. And they're also genetically traced and sort of tracked through their female ancestors. So that's how scientists figure out what family group they're a part of, is they trace them through the older females in the group. we've talked a little bit about in the past presentation, those other types of orcas in the Salish Sea, the Biggs orcas, and their groups are also made up of a mother and her offspring. But the main difference between the Biggs and the southern residents in this case is that those transients, those Biggs, oftentimes when the offspring become adults, they break away from their families and form new pods. So that's why if you are out watching the whales and you see some Biggs orcas, they tend to be in smaller family groups compared to the larger pods of extended family groups that are found in the southern resident population. So back to the matrilineal family I have up here. So Marina is the mom in this case, and then she has 3 kids, L83 Moonlight, L91 Muncher, and L115 Mystic. And then Moonlight and Muncher both have their own kids as well. They're calves. So Moonlight is the mom of L110 Midnight, and L91 is the mom of Magic, L122. And what I like about this family group is that they all have names that start with M, so it's helpful and sort of remembering that they are a little separate family group within LPOD, which is kind of cool. So within the social groups, orcas socialize constantly and can be seen sharing food, playing and greeting each other, which is pretty cool. So in this picture here, you have the picture of the one orca playing in the kelp, kelping. And then I love the picture on the bottom because it almost looks like the whales are posing for their family picture with them all spy hopping at the same time. So they have unique behaviors within their family, such as they can be seen nuzzling each other, kind of cuddling. And those behaviors show that there's a deeper connection than just survival and support when foraging or finding food, that there's a deeper social connection rather than just looking for food or survival, that their pods are more like a family, similar to the relationships that we have in our families. So the southern residents are social animals, and each pod has a unique sort of dialect, a series of clicks and whistles that they use to communicate. So it's sort of like each pod has their own little accent, and then there are shared calls between all 3 of the southern resident pods, between JK and L pod. And we touched on it a little earlier, but the southern residents create really strong bonds with each other because they do stay together for life. An example of this emotional bond happened a few years ago when, unfortunately, one of the orca's newborn babies died, and the mom carried her deceased baby for days, not eating or sleeping, showing that there was a deep emotional connection to that baby. And though this story is sad, it shows and demonstrates just how interconnected the whales really are, and that they do form those deeper emotional bonds with each other, past anything for just looking for food, that they have that social connection. And though the orcas are part of that matriarchal society that we talked about, there are some unique family groups in the southern resident community, as well as in the Biggs community, those transients we were talking about, that don't necessarily fit the mold. And so these activities are on, or these examples are on your activity sheet as well. But it's really interesting to see. So in the Biggs community, there is a pair of brothers, Flotsam and Jetsam, which you may recognize those names from The Little Mermaid, which is fun. And they live together, and that sort of makes up their family group. They sort of travel together as 2 brothers. Also in the Biggs population, T46 sort of adopted T122 into her family. And you can see that family unit traveling together, and it's really cool that they've sort of come together to support each other, and now they're one big family that travels around. In the southern resident population, L87 Onyx lost his mom and sort of floated between pods and was brought into different family groups throughout the southern resident community, and now he's back traveling with L pod, but he sort of had that connection and social network even when his mom died within J and K pod, even though he was from L pod. So these unique family structures in the orcas show that those strong bonds don't just form between the moms and their babies, but between all members of their extended families in each pod, which is pretty cool to see. So on to the activity. If you do have that create your own OrcaPod sheet that we sent out, you can start working on that now. And when you're finished, if you want to share your pod when you're done, we'd love to see it. If you don't want to, that's fine too. So I will stop sharing here. Oh, Eric, I see your question in the chat. Do I do orcas or humans? So on your activity sheet, if you wanna, you can use your friends or your family's human names, but if you wanna draw a fun saddle patch for them and make it unique, you can do that too to sort of make your own orca pod.
Sorry, and of course my computer is taking just a second. Okay, so let me share with you guys so that you can see this if you haven't already. Can you guys see the, are you looking at the right screen?
Yes, it's
Okay.
good.
So the way we have it worded, it says create your own orca pod. So Lucy did a really great job of explaining that the southern resident orcas, the way that they typically live is that they're in these large family groups. So they could be with their brothers and sisters, their aunts and uncles, their cousins, their moms and their grandmas for their whole lives, which is crazy. I always tell everybody, think about it like going to a family reunion, right? It's fun, but would you want to live with all those people for your entire life? Like, think about that a little bit. It's a lot of people. But obviously human families are a little bit different than that. So we went through some examples. Lucy did a great job of talking about the brothers that kind of hang out by themselves and travel. So they make up their own family pod. We've had orcas adopt other orcas, which is really cool. And, you know, just different scenarios that these whales go through, kind of like we do at different stages of our lives. Everybody at some point might grow up. You might, you know, form your own family group, which is really cool. And that's something that humans do a lot of. So when we got to the creation part, what we kind of wanted you to think about on that first question is right now with you all being young, there's someone who's taking care of you, right? So when I say who's the head of your family, who is your parental unit, or who is feeding you, who makes the rules in your house, who makes sure that you're protected and you're comfortable and gives you all those things that you need to survive. So for some people that might only be one person, for some that might be 3 or 4. You might live with, you know, older aunts and uncles as well, or just have different scenarios. So we had suggested drawing a dorsal fin. And that could be any shape or size. The saddle patches are all different and we're all pretty unique too. So that was just kind of a fun way to represent your family, to kind of look like orcas as well. And then you can put the names down for whoever the head of your family is, or if that's a shared role, put, you know, multiples. In the middle, we've got, do you have siblings, half siblings, step siblings? Maybe you have best friends. When I was growing up, I have 3 siblings, but my best friend was an only child. And so I considered her a sister. She was always coming over to our house and kind of grandfathered into the family, so to speak. So every time I drew my family tree, I included her as one of my sisters. So this would be the perfect place to be able to put that down on paper as well. You know, sometimes cousins live together very closely. So anything that you want to put in there, and again, a unique dorsal fin, a unique saddle patch, you can add the names for those folks. And then the last question was, do you help take care of anybody? So you might be the oldest out of your siblings. You probably have pets that you guys consider family: rabbits, cats, dogs, birds, fish, anything that you take care of that you feel like is part of your family. We want you to represent them in that box too. And then what's going to be really cool is at the end, if you guys decide you want to share, we're going to see how small some families are, how big some families are, how unique and diverse some families are. And we think that's a really cool idea, just to see all the differences and show us the capacity that we all have to learn from each other, love each other, and be a unit. And then kind of look at the way that orcas live their lives the same way, which is pretty cool. So does that help everybody? Yes. All right. And if you don't have the printout, you can just find a scratch sheet of paper and kind of do the same thing.
I have a question about breeding between them. Can do the pods, obviously all related, they're breeding with each other. The JK and L breed amongst each other. And then the second question is, can they breed with the bigs? And can they learn how to, and then the third question is they can learn how from the bigs how to eat other food besides salmon so that they're okay.
Lucy, do you want to answer any of those? I'll give you the option first.
Well, I'll take the question about they don't breed with the bigs, that they're separate. And I just watched a really interesting, I guess, I don't know, it was a Zoom or something, but how they've sort of evolved to sort of eat separate things, and they don't interbreed with them. And they're sort of becoming like separate societies. And part of the thing about it would be really great if the southern residents were able to sort of eat those larger marine mammals to get enough food. But part of living in that matriarchal society is those sort of cultures of eating fish are passed down through the whales' generations. And so it's just not a normal thing for them to eat those larger marine mammals. And it's been a part of their culture to eat those fish. So while we can really hope that maybe one day one of the orcas would, try a marine mammal and realize, oh, it's not that bad, maybe I can get some energy from that, it seems somewhat unlikely because they do like their Chinook salmon. So yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that, Sandy, great questions. We did a segment back on our kickoff. If you go to orcamonth.com, the website, we actually have a bunch of the videos that we showed during the kickoff under our recordings tab. And there's a short video, it's only about 18 minutes, I think, but Mike Ford did a really interesting talk on paternity. And he got into the genetics of what's going on in the Southern resident community. So if I answered, it would probably be a little over the heads of some of the kids, but I see why you're asking that question. So I don't want to defer in a way that, makes it seem like I'm evading the question, but he did such a wonderful job of kind of illustrating the family unit and the genetics. And then in some cases, looking at things that could cause inbreeding and possible complications, that I think it would be worth it if you're really interested in checking that video out for sure.
Okay.
To build on what Lucy said a little bit too, with these two orcas being totally separate cultures, they actually even evolved away from each other at separate times. So if we were to go through the geological time, they had just evolved to eat very different things. And that's one of the reasons that they can both exist in the Salish Sea, is they're not competing with each other for the same food resources. Monica Whelan Shields with Orca Behavior Institute, I always try to throw this question at her because she very beautifully explains that, as Lucy's going through these lessons, the Southern residents are such a unique community and they're a very large community. When you're talking about seals and sea lions, their level of intelligence is a lot better than fish. They can actually detect each individual pod by the sounds that they make. So they can tell the difference between the community that's hunting them and the community that's not hunting them. And so our Bix families tend to be smaller. Those kids, as they're growing up and starting their own families, dispersed from that original family group. And it's because they have to be very stealthy, very quiet if they're going to be successful while they're hunting their prey. So for a large group of Southern residents to try to figure out what a hunting technique would be to kind of work for them to take down prey like that would have to basically, they would have to change a lot about themselves. They're very communicative, they're chatty, they make a lot of noise. That's not going to be a successful, tactic in order to be successful when they're taking down prey, if they consider shifting gears and changing that. So the way Monica usually sums it up is she says it's basically like making a cultural concession or giving up who they are as a family unit in a community. They would have to start breaking down into these smaller groups and kind of figure out how their hierarchy and their structure works in a totally different way And that's just not something that like evolution or culture would just magically switch overnight, you know?
Yeah.
So what we're actually really hoping is that at some point, maybe they start exploring, you know, different fish species options for them. But that, you know, Chinook, they were just larger, fattier, calorie rich fish. It was really easy for them back in the day when fish were, you know, 50 to 100 pounds to just get a few of them, share with the family, and then kind of spend more of their time being together as a family unit. And right now, with the way a lot of things are going, the fish are smaller, they're scarce. So they're spending a lot more time trying to get themselves fed versus, you know, enjoying their community together and resting and playing. So we've just seen a lot of things that have changed. So those are all really great questions. And I'm glad, you know, you asked.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions, or is anybody ready to share what your pod, your family pod looks like if you were, you know, drawing them out as orcas?
Delia
Delia?
has her hand up.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I have a question about if an orca gets lost from their pod, is there a way they can find their way back?
Lucy, do you want to answer that one?
I'd have you take that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we actually had that happen a little while ago. There is a story about an orca named Luna, was an L-pod whale. And Cindy actually probably knows this story a little bit better than I do. I know that Luna was young when he got separated, and I think his mom was sick, and that's what happened.
Sorry.
Oh, you have heard that story? Yeah. So, you know, sometimes they could get separated. If they can hear each other acoustically, they can get back together. I think in our Bigs community, so our marine mammal eating orcas, we've seen a couple times where very young whales, in fact, the family that's in Puget Sound today is a really good example. So we have our T65As, and for whatever reason, they do some crazy things when they come in here in the summer. One of the younger males is missing from that group right now and was seen traveling all by himself up around the San Juan Islands. We have no idea where he is. Did he try to find another family group to hang out with for a little while? So is he kind of like a floater? Is he just off on his own orca adventure? When is he going to meet back up with his family? He did this last year too, where him and his sister broke away from their family group for a little while, and they're only like 7 and 9 years old. So it's a little early for them to be off on their own, but they're just doing it anyway. So I think there's a lot of things we don't really know enough about orcas. We know they can communicate over long distances. We know that sometimes they make little side trips or maybe take mini orca vacations. In the case with Onyx, he's left one pod and joined another. So I have a feeling they have a way to be able to talk to each other, to leave and come and go. But for the most part, you know, what we're seeing, and we only have research that goes back to about the mid 70s. So still kind of new. It's only about 45 years worth of research. I think we're going to find out new things as we keep studying the orcas. So really good question. All right, does anybody want to share their family pod? Wally, you want to share?
Yeah. So my first one at the top is my parents.
Yeah.
My parents.
Okay.
I told my mommy, Ma, and
This guy.
Papa.
Okay.
You want to show them the picture?
Perfect. I love it. All right. What about your second box? Who did you put in there?
My friend Talvin
Okay.
and me.
Perfect. Yep. You would make up your family pod, right? I hope everybody included themselves somewhere on the paper.
And my pets.
And who are your pets?
Remus, he's a dog.
Okay.
Now these are all 3 of our cats. Gianna, Blanche, and Margot.
That's awesome.
Do you want to show the whole picture at once? Kinda
And
hard to
this is
see
the
'cause it's
whole-
pencil.
This is the whole picture.
Awesome. So let's count. You had 2 people in the top box. You had 2 people in the middle box. And then how many people did you have at the bottom, or pets? 5?
4.
4. So you have a family pod technically right now of like 8, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. In my pod right now, I only have 4.
6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's 8.
Awesome. That's really cool.
8
Yeah,
people.
that's good. Good job, honey.
Does anybody else want to share their family group? Eric, go for it. Oh, I see. Okay, I'm going to read it for you because I think of the last couple times we've had trouble with your mic, right? Okay, so we have the leader of Eric's pod is named Bob. He has a sibling and best friends, Bo, Cash, Zach, and Raylan. And then pets are Cookie, Spider, Spencer, Simba, Sonic, Smokey, Travis, Richie, Ron, Barbara, and Abby, and they are all cats. That is an awesome pod. I think your pod and Cindy's pod are probably very much the same. Cindy's actually fostering some baby kitties right now that are about to find their forever home. So her pod actually gets bigger during certain seasons while she's taking care of animals, and then it gets smaller as she finds them all homes. But she has some resident kitties that she has been taking care of for years and years that are her babies too.
Yeah.
Delia, do you have another question?
Yeah. On the like picture on the sheet, it says there like at the bottom for one of the orcas, it says T46D. What does the D mean?
Yes. So because Lucy has been talking more about the southern residents, but we also said that there's another community of orcas that lives or comes in and out of the Salish Sea. They use this area to find food. Scientists kind of categorize them a little bit differently. So all of the southern residents are either going to be J pod whales, K pod whales, or L pod whales. So like when you see L87 onyx on your paper, that's a southern resident. Anything that starts with a T is going to be our transient or our bigs community. So in the past, we were calling them transient orcas. There are a lot of people that still say that word. But when we say transient, it kind of paints this picture that they're never here. They're always on the move. Maybe they're hard to find. And what's been happening over the last 10 or 15 years is they've actually been spending more time in the Salish Sea than the southern residents. So now when we tell people they're transient, it kind of doesn't give them the right idea about these whales. But the way that scientists have categorized them, that's what that T stands for. So those other 2 family groups we put on that paper for you are actually Biggs killer whales. So they're named after Michael Bigg, the researcher who figured out that we had 2 different communities here in the Salish Sea. So when you see the whales below there, you were saying T46D, T46E, T46F. What happens in the Biggs family is instead of them getting their own number, like Onyx has L87, if another whale came after him, it would be L88. What happens in this family group instead is mom is at the top. So again, it's a matriarchal orca society, and she is T46. So she was the 46th Biggs orca that scientists ever recorded. But when she started having kids, they took her number, her T46, and instead they started adding letters to it. And what that helped scientists understand a little bit better is when we see these kids underneath her that have that T46 designation, we immediately know that mom is T46. But in order to make them different, they get their number in the order that they're born. And so the reason you're looking at T46 and you're not seeing an A, a B, or a C is because those are her older kids that have already left the group and started their own orca families. So when we see the T46 family, and when we say that, We know it's mom and her kids that are hanging out with her right now. She has 2 adult males, so really big dorsal fins are in there. They're getting to be mature. She's got a younger male, so that would be our T46F. That's the last one that we know of that was born to her family group. And then T122 has a different number because that whale was seen way after this family was recorded, and now is all of a sudden traveling with the T46 group. So something happened somewhere along the way. Maybe T122 lost her family group, got separated. Maybe her mom passed away, and now she's traveling with this family kind of as their adopted family, and their group got a little bit bigger. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, if you guys were to look them up on the computer even, you'll notice like the T family groups start all the way back at the T2s. And they go all the way up to like the T200 and something. And that's just based on how many groups scientists have seen together so far. So great question. Wally, you had another question?
I want to tell you something.
Okay.
I'm going to do a Shuffy orca whale sometime too.
Oh, you are? Well,
Where are you
that's
getting it from? Remember?
World Wildlife Foundation.
that is awesome. Do you already have a name picked out for that orca, or are you going to wait and see?
I do not.
Okay. It's kind of cool to get him in and see if he has a personality first, right? Kind of like your pets.
Mhm.
Well, that's super awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Your pod's going to grow by 1. All right, guys, unless there's any other questions, we're going to just respect everybody's time. It's almost 4 o'clock. We're going to let you go. Later on, maybe within the next couple of days, this recording will be back up if you think you missed anything, or if you have friends who maybe want to join us next time and haven't seen any of these yet. So we'll put that up on our YouTube here shortly, but I want to give Lucy a big thank you and round of applause. Like she said, she has our last 2 lessons pre-recorded for us. I'm going to walk you through the activity the next 2 weeks. So we look forward to moving on and learning a little bit more about the Southern residents. And I hope you guys are really starting to see just how awesome and unique and beautiful these animals are, right? All right, you guys. Well, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Cat says bye.
Bye.
So do I. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, look,